Hi, everyone. Let me go and grab Julie. Bring her on in here. All right. Whew. It is very cold here in Cleveland, but I just got out of the shower, and so I am very hot. Hi.
Hi. Why?
I was just saying it's very cold in Cleveland,
Mm,
but as you know, I just got out of the shower, and so I'm just like still
yeah.
sweating,
Okay,
decompressing, all
good.
that stuff.
This is
So,
like a very cropped. I feel like last time this wasn't so cropped, but here we are for Instagram to know.
well, weren't you holding it last time?
I was, but when I held it just now, it was like so close. People
Yeah,
don't need that much of my face.
mm, debatable.
Anywho,
How's it
we're
going,
here.
Jules?
Oh, in these trying times, we're just trying to make it day by
Yeah,
day. So.
I hear
Yeah,
you.
which is what we're wanting to talk about today a little bit. So that's great.
Exactly, exactly. Stress, right? Stress, how stress can really just not only destroy our mental health, but also our desire and sexual selves and intimacy in
hmm
general.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, especially, I mean, obviously regular stress, but also especially chronic stress, which I think a lot of folks are dealing with all the time in this
Yeah,
current day and age. I mean, not even just like 2025, but I feel like there have been so many books, resources, different things over the last, I don't know, at least 10 years that have been talking about chronic stress and the impact it can have on our brain, our health, our memory, our bodies, all that stuff. And
yeah,
obviously, as sex and relationship therapists in the modern world, we're having to talk to people about the huge role that that can play on desire and arousal and
yeah.
sexual interest. So we thought that'd be very prevalent for today.
Yeah, totally. And as always, so this is our second time doing a live, so we should maybe introduce ourselves a little bit. I mean,
It's,
a lot of the people here follow us. So
yeah.
Julie and I are trying to do more of these live, these sort of live videos, just talking about topics that are not only impacting us, but impacting all of you out in the world today. So last time we talked a little bit about our favorite tips, and today we just wanted to talk about stress, right, and how it impacts everyone overall, especially when it comes to sex and desire. So I don't think we really need to like introduce ourselves. We're both ASEX certified sex therapists. We're both supervisors. We're both in Ohio, so we're both freezing, even though you're a little bit warmer,
Yeah.
being in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I'm
But
pleased, very pleased. Yeah, but
yeah,
that's us.
okay. Julie, so why don't you take it away talking about sort of this stress
Yeah,
and desire and arousal?
yeah, it's been on my mind so much this week in particular, just feeling a lot of stress in my own body. And I know, Matt, you and I, we've been tapping more into like somatic work and just how that can help soothe the body. All that to say, it's just been on my mind thinking about, wow, like I really need to check in on my clients on how much this is impacting desire, right? Any sort of chronic stress that folks are experiencing and normalizing that because far too often, both people are experiencing stress, but I don't think people understand like truly the impact that it can have on people's, again, minds, bodies, desire. And so oftentimes I feel like one partner might be sort of impatient of like, well, why? Or like, why can't you just get over this? Or what have you? And I think if we can explain a little bit of the neuroscience, a little bit of the why, then folks might have a little
Yeah,
bit more grace and understanding with each other. So
yeah.
that's
I
the thing.
I I find that this, you know, as sex therapists, we hold a lot of space for intimacy concerns, right? Both you and I see a ton of couples, we see a ton of people in the polyamorous community, and a lot of that is like desire discrepancy work, conflict management work,
Mhm,
um, you know, holding trauma work,
mhm,
right? Like how do we just exist as humans
mhm.
and regulate ourselves and then we have to show up and be a partner, a mother, a father, fill in the blank, right? A lover, all of that. So I find that this idea of like just talking about stress and how it impacts arousal, I'm trying to say, I don't know how, I feel like I talk about it a lot, but I'm talking about way more frequently now due to
Mm-hmm.
what's happening in the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's almost like for us, it's like 101, but for a lot of other people, it's not. And I think that's some of that's that space that we have to hold is understanding our bodies and even how we respond to
Yeah.
stress.
Yeah, exactly. It is so easy to forget that like so many people don't have this knowledge. And so a couple important things to note that Matt, you and I were just kind of thinking through yesterday, like one, cortisol. So when we are stressed in our bodies, one of the neurotransmitters in our bodies is cortisol. And when we're stressed, that increases in our brains, it floods our brain. And dopamine is our feel good, like arousal hormone, not to be confused with serotonin, which makes us feel good, but actually doesn't increase arousal. It increases like cozy feel good feels, right?
Hmm.
But regardless, cortisol is, getting in the way of these other neurotransmitters. So when cortisol is high, our body is in fight, flight, or freeze. We are no longer in our like chill, relax state. We are in a constant state of tension and hypertension.
Yeah.
And that means our body is directing its attention away from arousal. We know when people are in fight, flight, or freeze, blood is not flowing to the genitals, my friends. It is flowing
Mm-mm.
in other places. And so that's really important for folks to understand that when we're carrying chronic stress, cortisol is going to be one of the neurotransmitters that really impacts our ability to be present and show interest in sex or have any sort of desire.
Yeah, small amounts of cortisol are really good,
Yeah.
right? It can put us in the space of activation, it can put us in the space of motivation, it can
Hmm.
really kick us into gear, right? And I always describe cortisol as this big bully. And it just bullies dopamine and it just bullies testosterone as well. And when that stuff is getting bullied, right, it's really hard for that to show up in our bodies and want to actually engage in this desire, right? Because we don't even know it's there because we're focusing on all of these other areas. And I think that's one of the main points we wanted to like drive home today was high levels of stress, right, really correlate with low levels of desire.
And that is okay in
It's
some ways,
okay.
right? Like it's okay to say in the sense of like obviously we don't want you to live with chronic stress by any stretch or even just stress in general, but we want to validate the fact that if you're not feeling very sexy right now, if you're feeling very burned out or defeated or just exhausted, it makes sense that you're not feeling sexy. And again, that's not even just with your partner, that might be with yourself, right? Like people
Hmm.
have like a self-love routine, and you might not be feeling that with yourself right now because you're like, I'm just feeling either frozen or just all sorts of not good things. So,
Yeah, and sometimes I'll have clients sit and I'll explain this to them. I'll explain cortisol, I'll explain how it's a bully, I'll explain how, when we look at desire discrepancy or when we look at anybody who wants to just understand their bodies more, we always touch on stress and self-care because
mhm,
we know, okay, if this person has no self-care strategies and they have high levels of stress, no wonder they want to, or no wonder they don't want to engage with
right.
intimacy.
Yeah.
And so I'll talk a lot about, or I'll have clients come to me and be like, oh, well, that's not me. Yeah, when I'm stressed, I still have sex. Yeah, I still do it. And I'm like, okay, yes, and because sex releases dopamine,
Mhm,
sex releases serotonin, sex releases all these things. So when you're highly stressed out, there are some people who are like, what's going to make me feel good if I
mhm,
go and masturbate or if I go and I have sex with somebody. That's going to release a lot of these could release a lot of these transmitters, right?
mhm.
Hormones that we want,
Yeah.
right? And then there's all these other people who are like, I have zero desire to
Yeah.
have sex when I'm stressed out.
Mm.
And part of what we want to hold space for is that's absolutely okay. And there are all these other ways in engaging in intimacy that don't involve genital touching or don't involve any forms of sex.
Yeah. And before we hit on that, because I really want to, I think that's the important piece, but I also just want to notice as well that when we're in that panicky sort of state, something that I see as well is that some people, in order to alleviate that anxiety, and really need control. That's what we're all
Mm,
trying to seek out. And so when somebody's like, "Oh my gosh, my partner is so focused on their to-do list. They just want to
yeah.
like get everything done and have everything in order. They're more worried about the laundry than they are about having sex with me." It makes sense. It's okay. And again, like we don't necessarily want that to always get in the way. But again, like we want to validate that, yeah, it makes sense that they're nesting, right? They're trying to create an element of control in their environment. And
Yeah.
so again, we want to figure out how can you set some of those things aside to create connection, but also avoid the judgment of what your partner is doing. This is their way of trying to manage their stress so that they can show up better for you. But the to-do list is 1,000 years long and it's never all going to get done. So
Yeah.
we want to be mindful of that.
And we want to hold space for that too, because
Yeah.
there's just so much shame ramped up in sex in general that people can really feel like they're letting others down or they're letting themselves down if they don't have desire to engage.
Right.
And we just want to be two people to sit here and tell you that there's no need to feel shame about that. That is part of sort of how we function and how we navigate this world. And
Mhm.
learning some strategies around that potentially can help unlock.
Definitely. So, one of the strategies that I think can be helpful for folks in this is, again, to move away from goal oriented sex. I say again, because I say this all the time. I have not said it today, but is to move away from goal oriented sex, right? So, maybe you and your partner can just schedule some time to have some sort of intimate touch that is no
Mhm.
pressure, no expectation. Like, can we just give each other little head scritchies tonight? Or can we snuggle on the couch? Can we give each other a foot massage? Like, those things are going to release some of those positive endorphins that might not necessarily lead to sex. Who knows? It could as you
Mhm.
get to touching. There's no saying for sure. But that's a way to still have connection, to feel physically close to one another that takes the pressure off of it having to go anywhere specific.
Yeah, and what's that cuddling hormone they talk about, right?
Oxytocin.
Oxytocin, right? And so being in that space and just showing up and holding, just holding that energy of like, okay, I don't know if I can have sex, but let's like do some of these like head touchies, as you call them,
Mhm.
right? It really activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we want to happen. Parasympathetic, opposite is sympathetic, right? How I always sympathetic is stress, parasympathetic is pleasure, right? So we want to like get down into that space
Mhm.
and just being able to go to your partner or partners and just touch in a non-sexual way can be really calming and release those self-soothing chemicals.
Exactly. And then everyone can kind
Mm,
of get a little bit re-regulated, and then who knows what that'll open up, whether
who
it's just
knows?
like time for conversation or whether it's just like, oh, now we can finally sleep a little bit better
Right.
or sex, who knows, right? But just again, taking the pressure off to just enjoy each other.
I know with Jim and I, a lot of the time, it's just like we need to wrap around each other in some
Hmm.
way just to like feel that warmth with one another after a
Hmm.
really stressful day of neither of us having any desire. And that can just feel so grounding for us.
Oh yeah. No go.
No. I was going to go on and talk
Yeah,
about
do it.
warm hellos. So another cool tip that I talk to a lot of clients about when they're experiencing high levels of stress or want to start this reconnection again with their partner. And I did not come up with this terminology, but I love it, and I wish I knew who where I learned this from. But warm hellos
Gottman.
and is that a Gottman thing? Warm hellos and goodbyes. Okay, I feel like everything always just like travels back down
Charles.
towards Gottman a little
A
bit.
little bit. Yeah.
So, but warm hellos and goodbyes are such a phenomenal way of prioritizing connection with your partner.
Mm,
And essentially, what that is before you or your partner leave, or right when one of you comes home, you just sort of embrace each other,
mm,
right? And you just give each other a hug, and you're sort of just living in that space together for about a minute.
mhm.
and you're just smelling each other and you're taking it in and you're feeling your partner's heartbeat, you're feeling the warmth of their body, and you're just holding them, right? And you can add in a kiss if you want, and eventually it can move up into a makeout if you want, but it's just this idea of intimate touch and connection that does not have to fully lead to sex. It can, but it's more so, I just missed you. I'm so stressed. Let's embrace.
Exactly. Yeah. They talk about all sorts of rituals of connection, hellos, goodbyes, saying goodnight to one another. And we know like a 20-second hug or a 6-second kiss also
Mm,
releases those great endorphins that we were talking about. Oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine all get released if you're doing at least a 20-second hug or at least a 6-second kiss. So
mm,
anything that can allow you to connect. And I know, I'm sure there are probably kids and dogs and creatures all clamoring for your attention the second you walk in the door. But the more that you set that precedent, you set that boundary, like, hey, this is our moment to connect actually for a moment, the
yeah.
more that everybody around you is going to kind of fall into that, right? Of like, oh, okay, like this is their moment. Because it's just, it's just a minute, right? That you're taking to connect with each other.
Totally. I mean, I prioritize the cats first, but
Uh,
then Jim comes after that, and I think that's just
there you
how it
go.
should be. So,
Exactly. Yeah, I know. Carl and I tease each other because sometimes I like beeline it to the dog and then I'm like, no, wait, so sorry. Hi.
yeah, yeah.
Hi. Yeah, so I think that's another great
Mm,
one. Another thing that you can do is just engage in activities that do increase dopamine, again, that don't necessarily have any sort of intention behind sex. It can just create good feelings together. So that could be watching like a funny movie or going to
mm,
a comedy show together. It could be watching a thriller, right? You get a little
yeah,
bit of that cortisol, but in a good way that kind of gets you like, we know from research that those little boosts, those little feelings can bridge connection with you and your
yeah.
partner. It can make you feel a little bit more attracted to them. It can make you feel a little bit closer to them.
Mhm.
So engaging in some sort of dopaminergic activity. That could also be like a physical activity that you do together, whether that's like going and playing a sport together or doing yoga together. Literally anything that's getting you both connected on some sort of level that increases a little bit of that dopamine or a little bit of that, just little bits of cortisol. Again, little bits aren't bad.
Yeah.
That can
Can
be
you
fun.
say that dopamine word again?
Dopaminergic.
Dopaminergic. Okay. I'm
It's like
like,
an undergrad word.
oh yeah, there you go. I'm so glad you brought up thriller movies. Any
Mhm.
chance for me to talk about
Mhm.
horror
I
movies, I
thought so.
will. Um, there's this whole article that I wrote on my website about the connection between desire and horror movies. And
Mhm.
so Julie really hit on the crux of it is, watching a horror movie can really activate us and put us in a very vulnerable space. And what else feels very vulnerable? But intimacy, right? And engaging with desire. And so putting yourself in that space, whether it's a horror movie or a thriller movie or any of the activities Julie just talked about, uh, you can just sit there and you're feeling so activated.
Yeah,
And then you sort of come down off that activation. And who are you with? But you're with your partner here, right?
exactly. Yeah. Any sort of like play, anything like that, which again, like a thriller movie can be play. Like you can like hold each other and like, oops, I threw my popcorn at you. You can be silly, right? Like
Yeah,
whatever. I think like
totally.
there's so much play that can be involved in watching a thriller together, which I can't do. I'll accidentally
No.
like, I don't know, I'll scream or something. But
The way you just said, oops, I threw my popcorn at you sounds very much like the beginning of a 90s porno. Oops, I threw my
that'd be
popcorn at
perfect.
you.
Oops,
Ooh.
oops,
Yeah.
fell in a certain spot.
Yeah.
Better go get it. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
why
So
not?
let's I wanted to touch a little bit, and if you have more,
You're good.
we can always jump back to this, Julie, but when we talked yesterday about what we wanted to explore today, one of the areas that came up for me is it's this idea of, okay, so I have high stress and I don't have desire, right? And so we can sit here and we can say to all these people, yes, it's okay, it's totally fine, right? You need to prioritize self-care, prioritize, stress reduction. Everything's going to be there. Sex is going to be there. Intimacy is going to be there. But then I know there's going to be some people who sit and feel that pressure of like, well, we have sex at least twice a week and now we're not doing it. Or we have sex every week and now we're not doing it. And now I feel like
Mhm.
I'm laying my partner down.
Mhm.
And now I'm feeling all of these sort of shame feelings and guilt and whatnot. And so what
Mhm.
popped into my head is that research that we always talk about,
Mm.
which is the frequency research around sex and intimacy that I thought we could talk a little bit about in here.
Yeah,
So,
it's so helpful. It's so good
yeah,
for folks to know. We never really want to settle on a number because sex
mm-mm,
is so different for everybody. And you might have a season of life where you don't have sex for a couple months, and then you have another season where you're having sex multiple times a week, right?
yeah,
Like it can vary so much. And so, one, don't get hung up on the number,
right,
please, because it's up to you. Like who defines this number? Who's to say, right?
yeah.
But nonetheless, research does say.
Well, what's interesting, and you know what, some people are going to hear what we say and be like, okay, so we should have sex then.
Mhm.
And yeah, you can read it that way, and I always read it another way, which is so the research basically talks about, and this research is really heteronormative and centered around cis people,
Mhm.
cis hetero couples. But it essentially states that if you have sex once a week, you report higher levels of happiness compared to couples who have sex less than once a week. But the caveat here is if you have sex more than once a week, those couples did not report any higher levels of
Mhm.
happiness. And so, again, what you could hear in that research is like, okay, well, we got to be doing something at least once a
So,
week. And I totally hear
mhm.
that. But when you look more into the research, what you find is quality of interaction is what leads to higher levels of satisfaction, happiness, and sustainability.
Mhm.
So I know Julie and I scream this to our clients all the time. And it's not about frequency or amount of sex you are having in your relationship. It's
Mhm.
the quality and the kind of connection
Mhm.
that you're bringing. So if you are highly stressed out with the political climate and everything that's happening in this world, and you are forcing yourself to engage in intimacy, I don't know what that quality would look like.
Mm-mm. Yeah, that probably wouldn't be awesome. I don't know that it would feel amazing. I was just talking to a client about this research yesterday, and I was like, I don't even know what kind of sex they're defining, right? Like,
Penetrative, non-penetrative, right? Like
hmm
exactly.
yeah. So like there's so many ways to play and engage that don't have to like have a certain expectation on them. And that's why we talk about the quality over the quantity, because exactly to your point, Matt, if we are forcing ourselves, right, and it doesn't have to be like a non-consensual force, right? But if we're like, oh, I have to do this to like check the box or whatever,
Yeah.
then you're really actually not helping your body, because your body is going to start feeling like, oh, I can't trust the cues that I'm sending my mind, right? If you,
Wow,
yeah.
look at you with that somatic
Oh,
work there.
but it's so true, right? Like
Yeah,
you're teaching your body that, like, I can't trust my cues.
yes.
My brain and my body aren't listening to one another. And therefore, sex is not going to be enjoyable. It's going to start to feel like a chore. It's going to start to feel like something that you dread or feels kind of, You're going to be more disconnected in sex because your brain is out here
Yeah,
stressed about all the other things. And your body's sort of like, what's going on right now, right? And so you might
yeah.
even notice like difficulty with getting and maintaining an erection or having an orgasm or all the other things that follow along. And so, really slowing it down
Hmm.
and just allowing yourself to engage in whatever way feels good to you, which might not mean orgasms happen. It might
Yeah,
not mean, certain things happen. That's okay.
yeah,
Yeah. You got to do what feels right in your body
yeah.
right now.
To own it, right? And I think
Mhm.
when we talk about creating secure attachments with your body,
Mm,
and what Julie, what everything you just described is how you go and you create this secure attachment.
mhm.
You know, at the end of the
Exactly.
day, it's night, but at the end of the day, what I always say is sex is for you, right?
Uh-huh.
Sex is for you. It's not for anybody else. And so remembering that and living in that experience for yourself creates more of a secure connection. opens up dialogue to all of these different forms of intimacy that we talked about today and can
Hmm.
help create more sustainable relationships, not only with the people that you're engaging in intimacy with, but also yourself.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more piece, which is that if you're not in a relationship, this is still applicable to you. Again,
Exactly.
people have self-pleasure routines. And so if you're not really feeling it with your body, like maybe you normally masturbate a couple of times a week, and it's okay if it's dropping off. You can do the same things. Like just touch and be gentle with your body in nice ways. Take a nice warm bath, get a weighted blanket, pet your pets. Like do things that still feel good in your body that let your body know, I'm here, I'm holding space for you. And I'm not forcing myself to have an orgasm just because I'm used to having one so many times a week or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I got for
Yay.
today. I
I
don't know
love
about
it. That's
you.
great. That's plenty. That's
That was
plenty
a
in this
lot.
day and age.
Cool.
Oh, cool.
Well, yay.
Okay. Well,
Well,
thanks for showing
yeah.
up.
Thanks,
Love to have
everyone.
people here. Looking forward to more conversations. If you have topics, again, as always, that you want us to hit on, drop them in the comments or send us a
Yeah,
message.
for
We're always
sure.
happy to hear what the world is wanting to know about sex. I think we've got so many things that can be explored.
So many. And our goal is to try and do this weekly, but we are very, very, very busy individuals. So if we can't, I'm already thinking about next week and like what our schedules look like. So if we don't do it weekly, we're definitely going to come back and
2 weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks for sure. I mean, we're this is the whole point of doing lives is to just interact with each other, interact with the community, and provide a lot of the sex education that may not exist in the future.
Uh-huh.
So,
For sure, for sure.
so cool.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks,
have a good
everyone. Yeah,
Tuesday. Yeah.
it feels later, but yes, have a good Tuesday, everyone.
All right, bye.